Mhm. Hi there, welcome to this episode of the Health and Wellness Expo. Today I have Catherine Stapleton with me. Hi Catherine, how are you going?
Good, thanks, Hazel. Great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you
Yeah.
for joining us. It's really, really great to have you here. So Catherine has Stapleton Consulting. So I know this is a Health and Wellness Expo, but I think a lot of people, with our own health and wellness comes, like a really big impact is our business and how that actually affects our health, whether we're stressing about things and all of that sort of stuff. So I thought it was worthwhile bringing you in to talk about your business and what you offer to help support people so that they can run their businesses really well and ease stresses and things so that they can be healthy in themselves. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you became to get to Stapleton Consultancy or Consulting, just share us a little bit of a story about how you got there.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, definitely, like you say, the work life and personal life, there's definitely those blurred lines. Whatever's happening at home generally flows into work, and whatever's happening at work flows into home.
Yeah, totally.
And that's what really drove me to be self-employed as well, because I was one of those people struggling in an HR manager role, almost having burnout.
Mm,
And making that choice to go, I've got to put the foot on the brakes and just stop things for a moment and push reset. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, I have to say. So the business has been going for, I'd say, about 4 years.
mhm,
Probably 4 years in June, July this year.
yeah.
And so it came about. I always had that urge to want to be self-employed or run a business, and it wasn't until after I had my first child and being on parental leave that I thought, oh, this could be something I could do.
Mhm.
Went back, but thought I'll see how things go when I go back to work. Went back to work, didn't really enjoy being a part-timer in a business that really expected full-time hours from a part-timer, and I'm sure many mums and other part-time employees can relate.
Yeah,
There's only
totally.
so much you can
Totally.
do in 20 or 24 hours. And so also trying to keep up with everyone who was working full-time, 20 hours very quickly became 30, 35, and late nights and early mornings, etc. So what the other thing that really pushed me to put my foot on the brakes was also I'm a really passionate rower. I love being on the water. That's kind of my downtime. So
Mhm.
I have to say I'm struggling a little bit at the moment, not being
Yeah,
able
I
to get out.
imagine.
It's a bit tough. It's my place of getting away from the family and all the noise, just being
Yeah.
in a single on my own. So yeah, and when I left my job, it was about a year until World Masters, when we had them here in New Zealand.
Mhm.
So that was where I had the opportunity to do some contracting that then worked into consulting, but also the flexibility to really have the time to recover, do some training and start working on myself.
Yeah,
um,
nice.
that yeah, and just kind of rediscover yourself a little bit. I think so many people through their teens and their 20s, particularly, I don't know, our generation anyway, you get set up with the idea that you go to school, you go to university, or you do your training, and then you get the job, and then you'll be a manager or a boss or something, later on, and that's what
Yeah,
you work towards.
yeah.
But it's not quite the same once you start looking at the family side of things. Uh, so that's where I had that opportunity to rediscover myself and figure out what I wanted to do and what I'm passionate about. And one thing with so Stapleton Consulting's an HR human resources consultancy business,
Yep.
and having worked in local government and being quite close to the community, I really one of the things I enjoyed, and one of the things that I've taken through into the culture, or you could say the vision and purpose of the business, is about understanding how if you have a business that has great relationships with its employees, and the employer is really happy, they're balanced, the employees are happy and balanced, there's just this real sense of productivity and purpose, and those vibes really flow outside of the business into the community, into the customers. It goes into the community through the households that those people go home to. It flows into more sales because often there's more word of mouth, and then if the household's thriving, generally they're spending more money, which then finds its way back into the business and the community, and that's the kind of local economy. So that's why I really enjoy working with the regional businesses, because often they're also owner operators, and they have their own challenges. They're different to the corporate world. They're very much they're much closer to the coalface, and their heart and their basically their own finances and their passions are completely invested in this business as well. And they've had to, they've done the hard graft, setting it up bottom, and building it as they go. So I really enjoy working with those sorts of people, because they just have they just have so much energy and so much passion that you don't necessarily see working with larger businesses. But also the people who work for those employers are quite different again as well, and a lot of them are invested in the business and the passion and the drive and the purpose that business owner has too. So those
sorts of people have really, because they're so passionate about their jobs, and you and I obviously resonate with them as well, but then the highs and the lows emotionally become a bit greater as well, because they've got so much invested emotionally and financially in a business, because it's their passion, and they really want to make a difference with whatever they're doing. So it's so intertwined, isn't it?
Yeah, and it can be anyone who wants to build the perfect house for their customer. So they're a building company, through to orthodontists or consumer finance, providing those financial outcomes for their clients. It's across a whole range of industries, and I've always loved the diversity of working with different businesses, and the people mix that you have in those businesses, and that's where, so when I had parental leave for my second child, that's where I spent the money in the investing into the business in terms of the branding, and really defining what that purpose looks like and that messaging for me, because I didn't have that sense of direction, or I couldn't necessarily easily communicate it. And so once I had that, so the branding and the messaging that we have today, so see the forest for the trees, that's really what I'm all about. So I love, and even some of my friends will say this, I'm that problem solver. So they'll come to me with a problem and I'll have, the answers for them. I'll be that counselor. I just have that natural tendency. And so that's when it comes to working with those business owners and those businesses, because they have those highs and lows. That valued what I call HR sidekick, just working alongside them, just saying it's okay, it's going to be all right. Here's a plan. We'll get from A, we'll get to B, and then when we get to B, we'll get to C, and just keeping it really simple, and not trying to overcomplicate it, because once you start overcomplicating things, that's when you start to see the highs and the lows again. And HR, recruitment, employment problems, they're not actually as complicated as sometimes they end up being. It's sometimes just about getting things before they become complicated, and that's where my expertise are, whether it be from just asking the right question, from have you had that conversation with that employee, and sometimes, unfortunately, more often than not, is no. Okay, so you're making an assumption.
And if you do this stuff, if you do this stuff, you actually take that overwhelm away, and it's that stress and that overwhelm. I think a lot of people are too scared to have conversation. Oh, that's going to be a tough conversation. Sorry, I'm just moving to keep me out of the light so it doesn't go all dark. So chasing the sunlight at the moment. It's like some people are so scared to have those conversations because they think they might hurt someone's feelings, or that they don't want to hear it, or they don't know what that other person's going to react like. And if they can have someone like you to help walk them through that and help them have those conversations, and then realize actually they're not so tough to have, and the
No.
result of having those conversations is actually a much better outcome, then yeah, it's so worth having someone like you in their pocket. Yeah.
Yeah, and even just those times when, and this is with the COVID-19 and the lockdown, that's where I've had a few clients just sort of pick up the phone and go blah 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 blah, and just have that verbal diarrhea of venting.
Yeah,
And what am I going to do? How does this work? And it's just like, okay, yep, let's just figure out first, day one, what are we going to do? What have you communicated to the team? Let's answer some upfront questions, and then, okay, wage subsidies, this is how it's going to apply to these group of people, this is how it's going to apply to these group of people, and just trying to break it down based on what we actually know at that point in time. And I think that's what's been quite a struggle for people more recently, is that it's just been so fluid, and there's been so much uncertainty.
So what are you know, in general terms, you know, obviously client discretion and all of those sorts of things, but in general terms, what have been the like huge worries and you know, like obviously you've been unboxing a whole lot of things for people and breaking it down to, you know, just, well, let's just deal with this right now, and once we've sorted that out, then we can move on to these things. Like, what are people's real worries and concerns at this point? You know, I can obviously, you know, I can make a bunch of assumptions here, but you're seeing it at the coalface, helping people.
And I think it's we all have it to some degree, and I think it's that whole fear of failure. It's becoming much more real for people. As a person, or even more so as a business owner, there's so much more. If you fail, it's not only you, but it's also the people who work for you and rely on your business for their earnings. And like I was saying, with that whole flow of the business productivity through to sorry, my daughter's just going to make a
cameo appearance. Okay.
So it's kind of that flow from work into home. You can have it, you sit on this chair here, you can listen. So yeah, the joys of COVID-19 and dual parenting. What's your phone? No, not at the moment, sweetie.
Please, Mommy, they gave me busy.
Yeah, you can draw it.
No, not draw.
Well, go and find Dad then, please. So it's that flow from home into the community that really
Mommy, no,
that's the positive as well as the negative.
Absolutely.
And it's being recorded, okay? So sorry.
That's totally fine.
No problem.
This is your life. This is what we're.
This is my life. With a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, it's the juggler's reel, and so and I think that's the other side of the coin. So you've got the fear of failure in the households that rely, but also how do you still stay productive if you're still operating when you've got people at home with other demands on their time? How do you actually operate a business in a completely different model? The 8 to 5 just doesn't work. Unless you don't have kids, or you've got someone else who can do the full-time care while you can work. So there's some really interesting conversations that I'm having, and even still there's some great businesses doing some awesome work with their people, like there's one client who has gone to the extent of finding temporary employment for their team and connecting them up with other seasonal work in their local region, which is awesome. So, and then not only is he doing that, but he's saying, well, look, if you earn less than what you would ordinarily earn with me, I'll top you up.
Wow.
So you still get your normal pay. So there's some amazing stuff going on out there, and it's not all negative. It's a really interesting time, and some very hard conversations. So one hospitality client, he's just facing the fear of not being able to open his doors again.
That must be really scary. Like, you know, hospitality industry has just been slaughtered, you know, like they had no choice. They just have to shut their door.
It's been his career for how old will he be? About 20 years. Okay.
It's real tough. Like my heart really pours out to those people in those service industries that are struggling, where their contact relies on people coming and buying coffees or food in a takeaway sense. And also even just service providers like swim schools, you know, and all that kind of stuff, you know, like it's just the blankets ripped out from underneath their feet, you know, like they don't really have a choice.
No, and there's only so much you can do online. It's not like you can go, here's your coffee.
Online.
Yeah. I mean, the really interesting thing was leading into this is I went to Tech Fest at Claudelands.
Yeah.
That I think it was the Te Waka and Callaghan Innovation put on. That was really fascinating about how far some businesses and tech experts have got in terms of their augmented reality and artificial intelligence and virtual reality and all of that. And the context of the conversation wasn't about if, it was when, and is COVID-19 going to speed it all up? So because if we can't travel, or our travel is restricted, then we've got to come up with alternative solutions. And so we're really going to see some huge changes to the workplace from this. And I think taking it back to the purpose of this with the health and wellness side of it, it's going to come down to how resilient people are to adapt and how open they are. And, you know, resilience is not only your mental resilience, but it's also your physical resilience. Because if you're already sort of tired and run down from just making it through the lockdown, then you've got to find your energy and your resources somewhere else. So it's one of my,
I think it's going to be really interesting. So my husband's in the corporate world, and this week he was meant to be in Sydney presenting for a whole bunch of stuff. And so now obviously he's not going to Sydney. And so like tomorrow, and I just said, when it was first happening, I said, well, you'll just have to Skype in or something to the meeting, you know, that's just what's going to have to happen. Well, now they have had to go whatever video conferencing that they're using, but everybody has to do that. And it's like, well, you know, so is it going to mean that businesses, corporates and the like go, actually, you know what, you guys don't need to travel. You can just do it all from your home. And all of a sudden they're saving all this money on corporate, you know, flights and hotels and all that sort of stuff. All of a sudden that stuff just completely changes. So it will be very interesting how it affects not only the small businesses, but also, I wonder if I move back into the sunshine now. Oh, maybe not. Whether it's going to actually, like, you know, how it will affect the small businesses, but also those big corporates. And that then affects the hospitality industry as well, because they rely on people like corporates going and having business dinners and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's really interesting. I'm really battling. I'm going to get 2 seconds. I'm going to pull the curtain across.
Okay, do it.
You just got evidence of the fact that I'm only dressed from here up. It's shorts and casual attire below.
Yeah. Oh, look. So we were talking earlier. My husband's a school teacher, and so he's got the dress shirt and then the subbies and jandals because he's teaching online. I think so many people are being creative with their dress code at the moment.
I think so too. It's kind of like back in the day when you used to get the bloopers of like the TV presenters would stand up and they'd only have on underneath. It's like it's a whole new world. So PJ bottoms on the bottom and corporate on the top. So that's it's really cool. It's really interesting how technology has really stepped in, and we've all just kind of, well, not all, but a lot of us have just pivoted to the technology that we have at hand. Like, I didn't know how to have a Zoom, like I didn't know how to arrange a Zoom meeting and then record a Zoom meeting until literally, you know, this last week, when I had the airplane to put all this expo together. But you know what, it's like, well, the technology's there, it can't be that difficult. My kids seem to work it out. So people, you know, like people have been pivoting into what they have and the skills that they have, and have been adapting their businesses quite rapidly. So you know, how has it changed for you? Obviously you're balancing around someone that's still kids online and being a parent, and then obviously your business as well. Like, what have you been doing or adapting or changing or implementing faster than you originally intended to continue with your business and help people and support them through this time?
Yeah, sure. So it's been a really interesting journey leading up until here anyway, and that so last year I had about 100% growth in the business coming back post parental leave, and it was probably more, it happened faster than what I anticipated, but it put more stress on my time and my family commitments as well. Because that was one of the reasons of going self-employed and part-time, is so that I could have that flexibility with the family. But I found that there was just too many times last year where that was being compromised. So I was already kind of looking at ways to be more flexible and change the model. And I think what this situation has created is just the opportunity to speed all that up. So I had some ideas already in the pipeline, but I was thinking I'll get through what is typically a really busy time for me, the March, April time, get through that, and then use the winter to then do all the planning and bring all that to fruition. So now I'm just basically sandwiching it in for about 3 weeks, and just going to make it happen and have something to launch in a week or two's time. The other thing is, and I'd always been meaning to do it, and something that I've managed to get done pretty quickly, was be part of the Regional Business Partners Network. So that's through the Waikato Economic Development Agency, that is funded, that receives funding from the government to then support small businesses to seek out and have services funded for the development of their business.
Oh, brilliant.
So for COVID-19, what they've done, there's a pool of funding that's been allocated that allows small to medium employers, so that's typically 50 employees or less, or I think they use the criteria 50 full-time equivalents or less. And they can have access to fully funded HR advice, health and safety and wellness advice, and I think the other two options are business continuity and financial.
Nice.
So I'm the HR, one of the HR providers, and also just looking into the wellness side of it as well. So that's where clients can now, through working with me, get actually my services fully funded. If they meet the criteria. So so leading into COVID-19, HR was always seen as this nice to have service provider. You don't have to have it, you kind of have the knowledge yourself to make it work anyway. But I think what the situation's really created is that sense of, I need more help, and the employment side of it, like we saw with the wages subsidy and how grey the criteria was and how you interpret it. You actually need a good deep understanding of employment relations to actually know what the government's intentions were for the wages subsidy and how you apply it. And even then,
some of your comments and even things that you were posting, just going that almost like the goalpost kept moving as well. Like it was like, oh, but there's another rule, or there's a this, or there's a that. And
it was very fluid.
Especially if you're already in a space of overwhelm of you just want to be able to help your staff or whatever, and it's just a space of overwhelm. If an HR person is just going, it's actually quite a movable feast. For someone that doesn't deal in that space all the time, could be pretty overwhelming.
Oh, look, and I think also in its initial sort of framework, it was capped at 150,000 as well. So I spent the good part of a Sunday afternoon with one of my clients going, okay, well, how are you going to spend that 150,000? Who's going to go first? Because they couldn't make it spread over everyone. Then to have done all that work and then Monday have an announcement, oh, the 150,000's gone. You're like,
okay, all right, let's start again.
It completely did. Like, I spoke to the client after the announcement and they go, we can keep everyone, we can do this now, the bank's done this, because I had to just give them a task list as well, because they were just like, what do we do? You're going to have to talk to your landlord, you're going to have to talk to your bank, and then here's the plan for your people. And then come Monday, they were in a much better space after that announcement, kind of. Because they were just wanting that certainty of when level 3 was going to hit and when level 4 was going to hit for them, being in it was a hospitality one. But just for it to change, and not even, I think that following weekend, because I'd spent the most of the week most of the week basically just triaging questions online. I'd released a FAQ sheet by the weekend because so many questions were just quite standard. The context, the situation might have been different, but the actual question itself was quite similar. And then it was really good to see that the following week, a lot of those questions had been clarified by the government the following Friday. And so I've just cut the FAQ sheet. You can just direct people straight to that website now. And there's a lot of that basic information that wasn't there that is there now, which is good. And now it's just a matter of triaging those special cases.
So if there's people listening here that are, you know, those sort of 50 people or less full-time equivalents in their business, and they're kind of going, oh, I didn't know about how we could get this support maybe subsidized by the government. Is it best for us to provide a link direct to the regional page, or should we be just to your page and you can help them navigate?
They can get in contact with me and we can talk through what their needs are, and then I can connect them up with whoever their regional agency is. So Waikato have Te Waka, Auckland have a TEED, Tauranga have, I think it's the Chamber of Commerce. So there's different agencies, but they all get the funding under the same model. And I'm supporting clients virtually in Waikato as well as outside of. So I suppose the benefit, so that's one of the things for the business. The benefit has been with other businesses now being virtual. I myself can provide services to anyone in New Zealand. And I've done it. And I've done it already before with a client in the Hawke's Bay and a couple of clients in Brisbane in Australia where I used to work. So so no, we'll
put all your contact details down in the comments so that if people are going, oh, I want to know more about this, then they can go through your website and contact you through your contact details on there, because I think it's really important to know that.
Definitely. And the thing is, it's not just about HR. So part of the process is you have a chat with me and I figure out what you need from an HR point of view. But also, before you can get the funding, you have a 10-minute phone call with your agency. They figure out where your business is at, collect some information and make sure you qualify. And they'll figure out how much funding you can qualify for. But if you need some specific advice around financial or business continuity, then they can hook you up with some other providers in the network as well along those sense. So there is a bit of a cap on the funding that each business has, but the great thing about having that 10-minute convo is that if you need some other support, they can identify who that is, and then we could almost become your advisory board or your advisory team to support you as a business owner and getting through this time, because it's not just about getting through. I think in my latest video, it's, we've got version 1, which was pre-COVID-19 of your business. There's version 2, which is how does your business look during lockdown, and then we've got to prepare for version 3 and 4, which is transitioning out of lockdown, which is your level 3, but then there's also what does it look like post all of this, where are the opportunities and the silver linings. Because
this is a really good opportunity for people to take. It's like, okay, hospitality we've talked about a little bit, so that they don't have a business to physically run at the moment. So now's a perfect time for them to actually get all their employment relations understandings and whatever contracts and things like that, get all that stuff ironed out, because like you can do it all virtually. So you can have these kinds of meetings with those people so that when it comes to that next stage of actually reopening again and it might be re-employing people or re-establishing the relationships you had with previous employers, etc. You can do it the right way, and you can have a really good solid foundation to your business, whatever it looks like going into the next sort of when we come back from all of this.
And from a mental space as well, it gets you to focus on the future rather than whatever the yucky stuff's happening now, and that's quite uplifting for a lot of people. So I mean, prior to HR, my life was in sport and health, so that's where I originally studied before extending into business and HR. So that's probably the other element that I provide to the clients is talking about do you have some time away from the business just for you? Do you what's your downtime? How do you disconnect? As well as, well, let's look at some ways to lift you up, and often looking forward to the future and some goals is just as important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree. You've got to be able to have that time for yourself and that self-development time as well, that empowers you to be able to be your best within your business and all of those sorts of things. So I think sometimes people that are certainly running their own businesses and from a place of passion, they kind of sometimes forget about themselves, and their passion takes over, and it keeps them going for so long until they crash or something happens, and then they realize that actually it's fundamentally important to make sure that you're looking after your head space and your body space, so that you can be great inside your business as well. So I think that was why I felt it was really important to make sure I did have some business wellness advice in here and some financial wellness advice and all of those things, because especially for people that run their own businesses, it's too hard to separate business from life. And right now our business and life is just sitting right on top of each other, completely meshed in between, because it's just so I think that's really, really cool to know that you're still helping people, you're still working around the kids, around your husband's work and all of that sort of stuff, but you're still there and you can still provide that advice and people can still connect with you, so that you can help them through this time. So that's really fabulous.
And just on that note as well, I mean, some of the work that we'd been doing prior to this and just seeing that as a bit of a trend for particularly in small businesses, is that we've got a really close partnership with Vitae. So they're a counselling supports provider. And so if you're referring people through Stapleton Consulting to Vitae, you get it at a reduced rate because of that as well. So that's something that if you do have team members who are really struggling, or if you even knew before COVID, the lockdown, that they were susceptible to anxiety or depression or any of those other challenges, that you can reach out and get some of that support for them, because Vitae are very much operating remotely over the phone and video conferencing. And some clients, one in particular, like last year, had an employee, the business had gone through significant change and she was really struggling to keep up because she'd been in the role for about 10 to 12 years. And after 2 sessions, she just felt so much more clear-headed about what her future looked like. And just kind of help unpack some of those struggles that she had internally that were deflecting out into her work, and really help her make some good decisions for herself. And that's where their strength is that whole counselling, and just helping you understand what your thought processes are and how to redirect them, and the fact that you can actually control them as well.
That's really invaluable. And great to know that you have that link and connection through, and so people can, you can even just through your own discussions, you probably get the feeling, or like there's indicators that come through in the language, and so you can just say, well, look, there's that, we can connect you here, which is awesome too. So it sounds like you're providing a really, really cool service to people on your own grounds, which I think is absolutely fabulous as a business owner, so that you can balance it. It may not be quite so balanced right now, but you can balance it around your family demands, so that you can still be a mum and still row and do all that sort of stuff. That is just, it is honestly way more challenging when you work in a more corporate space, where those things are less important. They're driven by much higher demands and things that don't really consider necessarily all the time the needs, the emotional, physical needs of their staff.
Yeah, and I put it back to that when I decided to push my foot on the brake and actually reconnect with myself. That's where I know what my yes and no's are. Things that I'll say yes to, and things that I'll just go, nah, I'm not doing it. I'm going to keep it simple, and nah, that's not part of the plan. And that extends to people or businesses that I choose to work with as well and partner with. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you are coming on and joining us.
Oh, yeah.
So it's been really, really awesome to have you.
It has been. I have to say, with the COVID-19, everyone being online, it's actually quite hard to try and figure out, what to give your time to. So I've had to almost have a bit of a refresh and a reset and give myself a bit of a pep talk now and then, going, okay, am I really going to set my time to watch this webinar? Is it really that important?
Yeah.
But no, this is awesome. This initiative.
Yeah, I just find I've been in a similar boat. Like by Friday last week, I just went, actually, it's a free workshop. Yes, I should turn up for it. You know what? Actually, I've been on Zoom calls and doing interviews and doing all this stuff. I actually need to say no to this. And then sometimes you just have to say no. And it's like, well, people just accept that just because we're at home doing nothing, so to speak, I'm still running businesses and doing all those sorts of things. You know, sometimes you still have to say no, just like any other time that you'd say no to a meeting in person. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, that's great. Look, Catherine, I'm not going to hold you up for too much longer because I'm sure we'll want you. But thank you so much. Like, I think that the information that you've shared and just the tips about, you know, different avenues that people can go down and look at to help themselves and help their business, and just sort of stop that getting overwhelmed or turning into overwhelm, you know, the worries and things like that. Because if we can remove those and just be pragmatic and methodical in the way that we deal with them, they don't then get out of control and then create stress that then makes us physically and mentally feel really out of balance. So I think, you know, like I'm really grateful that we could find the time to connect and include this information for everybody in this expo. So thank you for your time. If you would like to, that's all right. If you'd like to connect with Catherine directly, her website, contact details and everything will be in the comments below. Yeah, Catherine's wonderful. Love her. Love it a bit.
Thanks, I love chatting with you too.
Definitely connect with Catherine. And make use of the, you know, there's so many things out there that people just aren't aware of that could help. You know, getting some funding for some, you know, employee relations stuff. That's awesome. You know, that's, you know,
it doesn't happen very often.
No,
and fully funded advice does not happen very often. It's and don't be afraid to take it up. And even so, part of what we do is obviously triaging it, but you get a strategy session as well, where over the phone and over Zoom, we can go, okay, well, what's this current state? Where are the opportunities? Let's do a SWOT. And work and figure out how we can get your workforce to that. Do we use this time for training? You know, there's a whole raft of ideas and opportunities there for people. So that's great.
People that have got employees. I very much like being my own boss, but not employing anybody.
You're not alone in that respect.
It may mean I juggle a number of businesses and all of those sorts of things. That's how I find my balance in life, and not having to answer to other people's expectations and not having to deal with other people's expectations as well as a happy balance for me. And that's what I found work. But, you know, like, obviously everyone can't do it that way. So I'm glad people like you are out there, Catherine, to help me through. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you at the next episode.